Before you watch this shocking story about murder, deception, and unexpected justice, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the moment when the truth is revealed in the most stunning way possible. Hit the notification bell to stay updated with stories that will leave you speechless. It happened on a sunny afternoon at Clifftop Manor, a sprawling estate overlooking the Pacific Ocean in California. Jonathan Mitchell was taking his elderly, paralyzed mother, Eleanor, for what he told everyone would be a relaxing day at the cliff's edge. Jonathan had been her caregiver for 3 years, ever since Eleanor had suffered a massive stroke that had left her unable to walk or speak clearly. Everyone knew that Jonathan was devoted to his mother. Everyone saw how he cared for her. Everyone believed he was a good son. But no one knew that Jonathan was deeply in debt. No one knew that he had gambled away millions of his family's money. No one knew that he was desperate. And no one knew what Jonathan was about to do. As Eleanor sat in her wheelchair near the cliff's edge, Jonathan looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then he pushed his mother's wheelchair forward with all his strength. Eleanor went flying over the edge, tumbling through the air and landing on the rocks below. Jonathan turned and walked away calmly, planning to tell police that she had rolled herself off the cliff by accident. But there was one witness to the crime, and that witness would become the instrument of justice in a way no one could have predicted. Build the story slowly and clearly. Eleanor Mitchell had been a remarkable woman her entire life. Born in 1945, Eleanor had grown up during a time when opportunities for women were limited. But Eleanor had refused to accept limitations. She had gone to college when most women didn't. She had become a successful businesswoman in a male-dominated world. She had built her own company, Mitchell Enterprises, which had grown into a billion-dollar corporation. Eleanor had been married to Thomas Mitchell for 45 years. Thomas had been a physician and a good man. Together, they had raised 2 children, Jonathan and his younger sister, Catherine. When Thomas had died of a heart attack at age 70, Eleanor had been devastated but had continued her work. She had run her company well into her 70s. She had mentored young business people. She had donated millions to charity. Eleanor had had a good life. She had experienced love, success, respect, and the satisfaction of knowing she had made a positive impact on the world. Then, on a Tuesday morning 5 years ago, everything had changed. Eleanor had suffered a massive stroke while working in her office. The stroke had affected the right side of her body, leaving her unable to walk. Her speech had been impaired, though she could still understand everything people said to her. Eleanor had survived the stroke, but her quality of life had been severely diminished. She had spent the first year in a rehabilitation center, working with physical therapists to regain some ability. She had made some progress, but the damage had been permanent. She would never walk again. She would never fully recover her speech. But Eleanor had not given up on life. She had adapted. She had worked with speech therapists to improve her communication. She had used her mind, which remained sharp, to continue to influence her business from her home. She had traveled in a specially equipped van. She had continued to enjoy life, even in a wheelchair. Eleanor's children had both been supportive during her recovery. Catherine had visited often. Catherine had helped with medical appointments and had been genuinely loving and caring. Jonathan had also visited, but less frequently. Jonathan had seemed more interested in his mother's finances than in her health. He had asked questions about her will. He had asked about her bank accounts. He had asked about her investments. This had troubled Eleanor, but she had tried to give Jonathan the benefit of the doubt. She had thought that he was just concerned about the family's finances. In reality, Jonathan had serious problems. Jonathan was 42 years old and had never held a real job. He had lived off family money his entire life. He had a large house, expensive cars, and a luxury lifestyle. He had been married once, briefly, before his ex-wife had left him, taking custody of their daughter and cutting off his access to more family money. Jonathan had become addicted to gambling. He had traveled to casinos around the world, betting hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time. He had lost millions. His mother had bailed him out twice, giving him money to pay off his debts. But by the time Eleanor had her stroke, Jonathan was in debt again. He owed money to casinos, to private lenders, and to dangerous people. He owed over $50 million. Jonathan had begged his mother to give him more money. Eleanor had refused. She had told him that she would not enable his gambling addiction anymore. She had told him that he needed to get help, to go to rehab, to change his life. Jonathan had been furious. He had visited his mother and had demanded money. Eleanor had refused again. Eleanor had told him that she was planning to leave most of her money to charity when she died. She had told him that he needed to learn to live within his means. It was this conversation that had set Jonathan on a dark path. Jonathan had begun to think about his mother's money. His mother had an estate worth approximately $3 billion. If Eleanor were to die, as her oldest child, Jonathan would inherit a significant portion of that money. His lawyers had assured him that even with Eleanor's planned charitable donations, he would still inherit at least $1 billion. $1 billion would solve all of his problems. $1 billion would pay off his debts. $1 billion would allow him to continue his lifestyle indefinitely. All he had to do was make sure his mother died. And make it look like an accident. Eleanor's faithful companion during all of this was a golden retriever named Buddy. Eleanor had gotten Buddy 3 years ago, shortly after she had come home from the rehabilitation center. Buddy had been trained as a service dog to assist Eleanor. Buddy could alert to medical emergencies. Buddy could retrieve items. Buddy could provide emotional support. But more than that, Buddy had become Eleanor's best friend. Buddy was always by her side. Buddy slept in Eleanor's bedroom. Buddy was present during Eleanor's physical therapy. Buddy provided unconditional love and support. Buddy had also developed a protective instinct toward Eleanor. Buddy could sense when Eleanor was in distress. Buddy was alert to any threat to Eleanor's well-being. Make viewers emotionally invested. On the day of Eleanor's death, Jonathan had told the estate staff that he was taking his mother for a scenic drive. He had said they would be stopping at Clifftop Vista, a beautiful overlook with stunning ocean views. He had said they would be back in a few hours. No one had questioned this. Jonathan had been taking his mother on regular outings as part of her care. What Jonathan hadn't expected was that Buddy would insist on going with them. Eleanor's nurse had started to leave Buddy at home, but Eleanor had been so insistent, making sounds and gestures to indicate she wanted Buddy with her, that they had loaded Buddy into the car as well. Jonathan had been annoyed but had said nothing. He had figured that Buddy would stay in the car or would wander away when they stopped. When they had arrived at Clifftop Vista, Jonathan had positioned Eleanor's wheelchair near the cliff's edge. He had told the staff member who had accompanied them, a young caregiver named Maria, to wait in the car. He had told her that he wanted to have some private time with his mother to talk. Maria had agreed. She had not suspected anything. Jonathan had stepped away from Eleanor briefly to make sure no one else was around. And then he had done it. He had pushed Eleanor's wheelchair with all his strength. Eleanor had gone over the cliff. But what Jonathan hadn't seen was that Buddy had jumped out of the car and had followed Jonathan and Eleanor to the cliff's edge. Buddy had watched as Jonathan pushed Eleanor over the cliff. Buddy had watched as Eleanor had fallen. Buddy had heard Eleanor's scream as she had plummeted toward the rocks below. Buddy had also seen the satisfied expression on Jonathan's face as he had turned away from the cliff. For a moment, Buddy had stood frozen, processing what had happened. Then Buddy had done something that would change everything. Buddy had run to the cliff's edge and had jumped in after Eleanor. Emergency responders would later say that it was a miracle that Eleanor had survived. Eleanor had fallen onto a rocky outcropping about 30 feet down from the top of the cliff. She had been badly injured, multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, severe trauma. But she was alive. Buddy had reached Eleanor and had lain beside her, trying to warm her body and provide comfort. Buddy had stayed with Eleanor until help had arrived. When Jonathan had reported Eleanor missing to police, he had told them that Eleanor must have rolled herself off the cliff. He had said that she had been depressed about her paralysis and had expressed suicidal thoughts. He had said that he had only stepped away for a few minutes, and when he had returned, she had been gone. The story had seemed plausible. The police had investigated but had found no evidence of foul play. Suicide in a paralyzed person was tragic but not unprecedented. But then, Eleanor had regained consciousness in the hospital. Eleanor had been in critical condition for days, hooked up to machines, unable to speak. Doctors had not been sure she would survive. But Eleanor had been a fighter. Slowly, her condition had stabilized. When Eleanor had finally been able to speak, the first thing she had done was tell police what had happened. She had told them that Jonathan had pushed her. She had described how he had looked around to make sure no one was watching. She had described how he had pushed her wheelchair with deliberate force. But Jonathan had already prepared his defense. He had told police that Eleanor had been suicidal. He had told them that Eleanor's speech could be unreliable due to her stroke. He had told them that Eleanor might be confused about what had happened. He had also suggested that Eleanor might be making up stories about him to get attention. Without physical evidence, the police had been uncertain. It was Jonathan's word against Eleanor's. And Jonathan had prepared well for this scenario. Then, the police had received an unexpected discovery. Maria, the caregiver, had been questioned again. In her second interview, she had mentioned something she had forgotten to mention the first time. She had noticed that Buddy had been missing from the car when Jonathan had returned. She had seen Buddy on the cliff's edge, next to Jonathan, just before Jonathan had said his mother was missing. This small detail had been enough to make the police take another look at the crime scene. When forensic investigators had re-examined the cliff's edge, they had found something they had missed the first time: security camera footage from a nearby hiking trail. The footage had been recorded by a wildlife camera set up to monitor birds and animals. And the camera had captured everything. The footage clearly showed Jonathan pushing Eleanor's wheelchair off the cliff. It showed the deliberate, forceful nature of the push. It showed Jonathan's face and his expression as he had committed the act. It also showed Buddy jumping after Eleanor. When police had shown Jonathan the footage, he had broken down. He had confessed to everything. He had told police about his gambling debts. He had told them that he had panicked about losing his mother's money to his creditors. He had told them that he had decided that killing his mother was his only option. Jonathan had been arrested and charged with attempted murder. The story had gone viral immediately. News outlets had covered it extensively. Wealthy son attempts to murder paralyzed mother for inheritance, caught on camera. But the most talked about part of the story was Buddy. Buddy had become a hero. Buddy had witnessed a crime. Buddy had jumped off a cliff to stay with Eleanor. Buddy had helped save Eleanor's life by staying with her and keeping her warm until help had arrived. Local news outlets had run stories about Buddy. National media had picked up the story. Buddy had become famous on social media. People had started a GoFundMe for Buddy's medical care. Buddy had been injured in the jump and had needed surgery. The story had been shared millions of times with the caption, "This dog witnessed a murder and jumped off a cliff to save his owner's life. This is true loyalty." People had been moved by Buddy's actions. Buddy had represented something that most people craved: unconditional love and loyalty. Buddy had risked his own life to protect Eleanor Karma or the big reveal. Jonathan's trial became one of the most high-profile criminal trials of the year. The prosecution's case was straightforward. They had the security camera footage showing Jonathan pushing Eleanor off the cliff. They had Eleanor's testimony about what had happened. They had Jonathan's confession. The defense attorney had tried to argue that the camera footage was unclear, but experts had confirmed that the footage clearly showed Jonathan pushing the wheelchair. The defense attorney had tried to argue that Jonathan had been mentally unstable due to his gambling addiction, but expert witnesses had determined that Jonathan was mentally competent and had known exactly what he was doing. The trial had lasted 3 weeks. The jury had deliberated for only 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict: attempted murder. Jonathan had been sentenced to 30 years in prison. The financial consequences for Jonathan had been severe as well. His assets had been frozen pending criminal proceedings. He had lost access to any of his mother's money. In fact, Eleanor had changed her will to make sure that Jonathan would receive nothing. All of her money would go to Eleanor's sister Catherine, with instructions that the money be used to care for Eleanor and to support charitable causes. Jonathan had also faced a civil lawsuit filed by Eleanor. Eleanor had sued her son for damages related to the attempted murder. A judge had awarded Eleanor a settlement of $100 million from Jonathan's personal assets. But the most significant consequence for Jonathan was his loss of reputation. He had been exposed as someone who would murder his own mother for money. He had been exposed as a coward and a criminal. Inside prison, Jonathan had been treated harshly by other inmates. When they had learned that he had tried to murder his own mother, his own disabled mother, they had ostracized him. Other inmates had made his life in prison extremely difficult. Jonathan had attempted suicide twice in his first year of prison, but both attempts had been foiled by prison staff. Meanwhile, Eleanor's recovery had been remarkable. Eleanor had spent months in the hospital recovering from her injuries. She had undergone multiple surgeries. She had endured intensive physical therapy. The doctors had told her that the chances of her walking again were essentially zero. But Eleanor had refused to accept that outcome. Eleanor had worked with physical therapists for hours every day. She had refused pain medication if it would interfere with her ability to focus. She had pushed herself harder than anyone thought was possible. And 6 months after being pushed off the cliff, Eleanor had managed to stand with assistance for the first time since her stroke. It was one small step, but it had been symbolic of her determination to reclaim her life. 2 years after the attempted murder, Eleanor had been able to walk short distances with a walker and assistance. It had been a long, painful journey, but Eleanor had refused to let her son's cruelty define her future. Buddy had also recovered from the injuries he had sustained when jumping off T. Cliff. Buddy had undergone surgery to repair a broken leg and internal injuries. Buddy had spent weeks in veterinary rehabilitation. But Buddy had recovered fully. And Buddy had remained by Eleanor's side through the entire recovery process. Buddy had become even more famous after the trial, with news stories highlighting the dog's loyalty and bravery. Buddy had been offered movie deals and book deals. Buddy had been nominated for several awards for animal bravery. Buddy had become a symbol of unconditional love and loyalty. But Eleanor had declined most of these offers on Buddy's behalf. Eleanor had said that she didn't want Buddy to become a circus animal. She had said that she just wanted Buddy to be a dog, to live a quiet life with her, away from the spotlight. However, Eleanor had agreed to allow a documentary filmmaker to tell Buddy's story. The documentary, titled Buddy, A Story of Loyalty and Love, had aired on a major streaming service and had been watched by millions of people. The documentary had won several awards and had been praised for its honest portrayal of the events. Eleanor had also used her experience to become an advocate for elder abuse awareness. She had given speeches at universities and conferences about recognizing and preventing elder abuse. She had worked with organizations that protect vulnerable adults. Most importantly, Eleanor had become an advocate for strengthening laws against elder abuse. She had worked with legislators to draft a bill that would increase penalties for crimes against elderly and disabled people. The bill had been passed and had become known as Eleanor's Law. The moral takeaway. 5 years after the attempted murder, Eleanor sat down for an interview with a major news magazine. The interviewer asked Eleanor what had kept her going through such a traumatic experience. Buddy, Eleanor answered simply. Buddy kept me going. When I was lying at the bottom of that cliff, broken and bleeding, Buddy was there. Buddy wasn't judging me. Buddy wasn't disappointed in me. Buddy was just loving me and trying to keep me alive. That gave me a reason to fight. That gave me hope. Eleanor paused, reflecting on everything that had happened. I also want to say something about my son, Eleanor continued. What Jonathan did was unforgivable. He tried to kill me to steal my money. He put me through pain and trauma that will stay with me for the rest of my life. But I have realized that holding on to rage and hatred toward him will only hurt me more. So I have forgiven him. Not for him, but for me. I have forgiven him so that I can move on and build the rest of my life. The interviewer asked Eleanor if she had maintained contact with Jonathan. I have visited him in prison twice, Eleanor said. Both times, I tried to talk to him, to help him understand the harm that he caused. But Jonathan is not willing to accept responsibility. He continues to blame me, to blame his gambling addiction, to blame everyone but himself. So I have stopped visiting. But I pray for him. I pray that one day he will understand what he did and that he will find redemption. Eleanor also spoke about Buddy. Buddy is the best friend I have ever had, Eleanor said, and her voice cracked with emotion. Buddy saw something terrible, and instead of running away, Buddy ran toward me. Buddy risked his own life to save my life. That is what true love is. That is what true loyalty is. Buddy has taught me more about goodness and compassion than any human being. The interview had been watched by millions of people. Eleanor's story had resonated with people around the world. People had been moved by her determination, her grace, and her capacity for forgiveness. Eleanor had received thousands of letters from people telling her that her story had inspired them to appreciate the people and animals in their lives. People had told her that her story had changed how they viewed their own struggles. Catherine, Eleanor's daughter, had spoken publicly about her brother's crime and about her admiration for her mother's strength and forgiveness. "My mother is the strongest person I know," Catherine had said. "She survived a stroke. She survived an attempted murder by her own son. She recovered from injuries that doctors said would leave her permanently disabled. She has turned her trauma into advocacy that has helped thousands of vulnerable people. And she has done all of this with grace and forgiveness. I am honored to be her daughter." Catherine had also become involved in Eleanor's advocacy work. Together, they had founded the Eleanor Mitchell Foundation for Elder Protection, which provided resources to victims of elder abuse and supported organizations working to prevent elder abuse. The foundation had helped over 5,000 victims of elder abuse in its first 5 years of operation. The foundation had provided legal support, medical care, financial assistance, and emotional support to vulnerable adults who had been abused by family members or caregivers. Buddy had lived another 8 years after the attempted murder. When Buddy had passed away at age 16, Eleanor had held a small memorial service for her faithful companion. "Buddy saved my life," Eleanor had said at the memorial. "Not just by jumping off that cliff and staying with me that day, but by showing me every single day what unconditional love looks like. Buddy showed me that the best part of being alive is the relationships we have with others. Buddy showed me that loyalty and love are more valuable than money or power. Buddy was a gift to me, and I will be grateful for that gift for the rest of my life." After Buddy's death, Eleanor had established the Buddy Award for Animal Bravery, an annual award given to animals who had demonstrated exceptional bravery and loyalty in protecting humans or other animals. Years later, when people asked Eleanor about her experience, she would always say the same thing. "I was blessed to have Buddy in my life. And I was blessed to survive what happened to me. My attempted murder could have destroyed me. It could have filled me with rage and hatred. But instead, it taught me what truly matters in life. It taught me that money is meaningless without the people and animals we love. It taught me that loyalty and love are the most precious things we can have. And it taught me that it is possible to survive tremendous pain and trauma if we have something worth fighting for." The final lesson. This story teaches us something profound about love, loyalty, and the true value of life. Jonathan Mitchell had everything that money could buy. He had a mansion, luxury cars, and access to billions of dollars. But he had nothing that actually mattered. He had no genuine love. He had no real relationships. He had no meaningful purpose. All he had was greed and desperation. When faced with financial problems, Jonathan's solution was to murder his own mother. He was willing to destroy the one person who had cared for him, who had given him life, who had given him opportunities. He was willing to commit a heinous crime to maintain his lifestyle. But Buddy, a dog, an animal with no money, no power, no advantage in the world, showed more loyalty, more courage, more love than Jonathan could ever show. Buddy jumped off a cliff to stay with Eleanor. Buddy risked his own life. Buddy showed unconditional love. The irony is profound. Jonathan, with all his advantages, was willing to commit murder. Buddy, with no advantages at all, was willing to die. Eleanor's recovery and her advocacy work show us that even after tremendous trauma and betrayal, it is possible to find meaning and purpose. It is possible to forgive. It is possible to use our pain to help others. The lesson for all of us is this: money and power are temporary. They can be lost, stolen, or given away. But love, loyalty, and genuine relationships are permanent. They are what make life worth living. They are what give life meaning. Never forget the value of the people and animals who love you. Never take them for granted. And never let greed or desperation cause you to harm the people who care about you. Asterisk if this story about loyalty, love, and the true cost of greed moved you, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story that reminds us what truly matters in life. Hit the notification bell to stay updated. And in the comments below, Share your thoughts about this story. How has an animal or person shown you unconditional love? What does loyalty mean to you? Your perspective matters, and I'd love to hear it. Asterisk about this story. This story was crafted to illustrate the dangers of greed and the incredible power of unconditional love and loyalty. It's a reminder that animals often demonstrate more compassion and courage than humans. It's also a testament to the power of survival, recovery, and the ability to turn trauma into advocacy that helps others. The story shows that true wealth is measured not in money but in the quality of our relationships and our capacity for love.